I think my spiel is going to take a different turn. I am someone who is not, who represents people who are actually impacted, as opposed to having been impacted myself. Our job at Reprieve is to stand for the people whose voices can't be heard in person or can't be heard at all because they are no longer with us. I can easily say without question that most of my clients are dead. We represent the family members in their quest for justice, in their quest for accountability from the US government. And sometimes that quest for accountability is through courts of other countries with better laws, because our laws were all written to protect the government. In fact, we can't even sue them unless they've specifically written a law that allows us to do so in that particular capacity. So there are different avenues that counterterrorism organizations such as mine try to seek accountability. One of them is through litigation in partner countries, so Ramstein Air Force Base, Germany. We have litigation going in Germany, Pakistan. The complicity or lack of complicity, however you choose to look at it, of the Pakistani government in US drone strikes. The UK and their offering of intelligence information and coordinating on kill lists. And those governments have had varying degrees of success. The litigation in those countries, most of them have been more successful than our litigation here. We have one case pending right now in US courts, and it was dismissed. And it was booted out essentially because the US has this doctrine where every military action has no review. The military reviews itself, which is to say the executive reviews itself, which sort of leads into this tunnel of secrecy and lack of accountability. But for other countries, it varies. The UK actually came out and said that this was a really concerning and disturbing reality, and that the UK shouldn't actually be agreeing to help the US in these strikes, especially in countries where there is no active hostilities. But then they ultimately concluded that to rule to that effect would hinder relationships with the United States. And it was essentially that embarrassment factor that made it so that we didn't win that case. In the case of Pakistan, there have been actually some really great rulings out of high courts in Pakistan with regard to our drone strike cases, but they have no effect because of one of many problems with Pakistan is that their judiciary doesn't have the power that ours does. Essentially, when the Supreme Court in the United States says something, for the most part, it happens. And that isn't the case there. So there are differing levels of doing this, and Reprieve itself struggles with how to best represent families. I think we've all come to the vehement conclusion that we absolutely under no circumstances expect to win these cases in US courts, because US courts are kangaroo courts, especially with regard to national security. There's absolutely no way, given the current law, to win, but what we will do is raise those cases from the highest buildings, and essentially our plight is with the US population. It's with you guys. We don't really care what the judge thinks of our case, and we really, really don't care what the government thinks. We're writing our pleadings so that hopefully they end up in a newspaper somewhere and someone reads them, or they get shared on social media. We have all these different campaigns with varying levels of success that are essentially social media campaigns. In Yemen, a few years ago, there were these artists that all got together. You may have heard of it. And they essentially, it was the not a bug splat thing. So they're essentially calling victims bug splats, going back to the whole video game scenario. And these artists basically created this enormous portrait of a young girl. So to say, like, that she is a human, she's a person, and that would be seen from drones. And in fact, apparently is also visible from satellite in the sky. So different things that are that don't necessarily have the effect that you might think. We're not really targeting the drone pilots in that particular case, although we would be happy if they were affected. But we're just trying to get everyone involved. We want people to understand the ramifications. We want people don't take very well to statistics, but when you tell them that in targeting 41 men, 1,147 were killed, that most of those men, their names were reported by the government as having been killed 3 times, and as many as 7 times. They're getting it wrong. There's like undeniable evidence that they're getting it wrong. Their own reports say that there's 1 civilian death for every drone strike. You could make the argument, the ticking time bomb argument that Sean was referring to, that a lot of popular movies are now making, that is sufficient, but we also know that it isn't just 1 civilian casualty. We had a client who his relative and that relative's son were killed in a drone strike. One was an imam preaching anti-Al-Qaeda messages. On Friday, everyone was in town for a big wedding. It was his nephew's wedding, my client's son's wedding. And so it was a week-long affair. Relatives came in from different areas in Yemen. And on Friday, he preached an anti-Al-Qaeda sermon saying that Islam does not permit the killing of innocents under no circumstances. They're lying to you, and basically just logicked through, where I think we all are now, that Islam does not stand for the murdering of anyone, least of all civilians. And after the sermon, he was taken aside by my client, who was instructed by this man's father. Sorry, it's quite the family tree. Basically, there was concern in his family that, he shouldn't be saying that maybe someone in another neighboring village who has relations with Al-Qaeda is going to not like that you're kind of speaking out against them. And then he said, no, this is what I have to do. I'm a thought leader in this community. He was quite educated for the area in Yemen, and so was my client. And he was saying, we're the scholars. We have to be giving this message. This is our job. The next day was my client's son's wedding. There are videotapes of them dancing together that are juxtaposed with videotapes of this imam's body parts. And they're in Laura Poitras's exhibit at the Whitney right now. It's an exhibit about national security, and it's grotesque and it's horrific, but that's what we need people to see, which, is obviously for each and every person. But those events were 3 days apart. 3 days after the wedding, on the Tuesday from the Friday of the sermon, these 3 young men, came into my client's village and were essentially asking for this imam. They're asking around for him. Where is he? No one really knew who these guys were. They'd never seen them before. They were all under the age of 20. And they said, no, he's not here. Please come back. They came back. They kept coming back. And they finally found him. He had just finished evening prayer at the mosque. And they had walked out to meet him. And as soon as he met with these 3 unidentified young men, he and his son, who came along for protection because he was a local traffic cop, were blown up. And the irony of who they managed to kill is one element of it. The fact that this drone strike happened when these parties merged, these 2 men, the imam and his son, and these 3 unidentified people, when the 3 unidentified people had to pass through, in order to get to their area, because it's a rather secluded place in Yemen, they had to pass through security checkpoints. The actual location of the drone strike was 2.5 kilometers from a military base. The idea that they couldn't capture this guy is non-existent. No one believes that. But the government in court doesn't actually ever have to defend that point because they boot the case out on standing grounds. They essentially never have to defend why they thought that these 3 guys, if they were in some way related with Al-Qaeda, why they couldn't have captured them or essentially drone struck them before they encountered other people. The laws require, no matter if you're in war or out of war, that you not kill innocent civilians. There are technical terms, but essentially it's that you kill with distinction, that you target only those who you know should be targeted, and that you don't kill innocent civilians in the process. Anyway, that's one case. We also have another case going. We're challenging the kill list at large because the idea that in law you can only kill a person in a non-war zone if they pose an imminent threat of death to American interests. Our allegation is that, among many different issues with that, including that the authorization for the use of military force does not extend to Al-Qaeda. It doesn't extend to all the factions of Al-Qaeda. It extends to the one that existed then. It doesn't extend to ISIS. It doesn't extend in every country all across the globe, which I think everyone has mentioned tonight, is that it's a global war. They're using this one law to justify an ongoing war everywhere. But the imminence requirement is sort of the main point of our case in this upcoming case that we have yet to file, that in order to put names on a kill list and assassinate people, you have to form a list. The president takes an average of 58 days to sign off on a person getting on the kill list. He then legally, according to their own internal doctrine and not according to anything the legislative branch has gotten their hands on or we've seen, he has then 60 days to kill this person. So the idea that they pose an imminent threat for all of that time, what is imminence? So we're sort of going back and forth, and they've redefined imminence, and in a leaked white paper on the topic, they've said that in the case of targeted killings or assassinations, that they don't need to prove imminence because people affiliated with Al-Qaeda are always in a continuing, ongoing effort to destroy American interests. So they've essentially not only written their own war on the world forever with the authorization for the use of military force, but they've also completely redefined imminence for themselves so as to subvert international law. So my call for all of you is that you tell as many people as you can, and I'm sure that I'm speaking to a room of people who've already done that. But this is very much a war of public opinion. The government will not budge. They said a few weeks ago that they're going to release statistics, but they're releasing statistics not as to civilians or targeted people, not that we can believe them anyway, because we all know that they are counting they're counting young men, essentially, regardless of any kind of proof of affiliation as militants, is basically that we turn this around ourselves. And I think that you are all of that opinion since you're standing here trying to do something about it. So thank you. I actually have a video of one of my clients talking about drones, which I probably should have played before I rambled for so long, but
This is a good view.
Is it good?
Yeah, this is a good view.
You start.
Yeah, so you can just describe what it was like, when you were at the time that you were living in, when you were still living in Yemen, what life was like. How often did you see drones? Were people afraid of them? Did people change the way they lived? Did they change their routine because of the drones? Like, how did it make people feel?
حقيقة أن أحكي عربي أنا.
عربي.
حقيقة أن أعيش في صنعاء. صنعاء تبعد عن القرية اللي أسكن فيها حوالي.
I'm going to speak in Arabic. I lived in Sana'a. Sana'a is about 700 kilometers from the village I come from. Usually, during the holidays, we have 2 holidays each year. Eid al-Fitr, after Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha. I always visit the village. Last time I was in the village, there were no planes in the sky. It was 2010. There was nothing. The story began after 2012, during the year 2012. That's when the government was at war with Al-Qaeda, when Al-Qaeda occupied Abiyan and Shabwa. During the war with Al-Qaeda, the government came to an agreement with Al-Qaeda, according to which Al-Qaeda would withdraw from Abiyan and Shabwa. It was a strange agreement. Al-Qaeda was to withdraw, but to go where? Hadramaut is at the border of Shabwa. From the moment they withdrew, that's when we started to hear about the presence of Al-Qaeda and affiliates. After that date, we started to hear the planes, and people started to... It's a strange story. They allowed Al-Qaeda to withdraw from Shabwa. They did not fight them. No. They allowed them to retreat. And then when they arrived in Hadramaut and spread everywhere, in Gora, Amakan, and Jabal, then they began to use drones to hunt them one after the other. It's an incomprehensible strategy. In any case, that's when it began. Back in Sana'a, I used to hear about drones, but I had no idea. In August 2012, I was in Hadramaut for my son's wedding. It was after Eid al-Fitr. From the moment I arrived in Hadramaut, I heard that noise all the time. It's like an echo in your head. Even when you put your head down on the pillow to sleep at night, you thought, why is that noise always there? This is what they called, in a code word, the black one. What is it? It's a plane up there. Why is it flying above us? They told me. It's to get the Al-Qaeda people who fled Shabwa. Now they're being hunted down here. I asked, what about the civilians? They said, no, civilians are safe. They know where the targets are, and only go after them. At least in August 2012, that's what people thought. Then the strike on Kashmir happened. It was the day after my son's wedding. It was very scary. Strikes inside the village. Since the afternoon, Car had been going in and out of the village, looking for Salem, my brother-in-law, for speaking out against Al-Qaeda. These people were there from after the afternoon prayer until dinner time, so approximately from 5 until 9 p.m. The car was coming in and out. If those 3 men in the car were wanted, why didn't they strike them when they were alone? Why wait until Salem and his son got there? What's the purpose of this? Do they suspect the whole village? Is anyone who speaks to those men in the car considered a target as well? In any village, a stranger can come in a car and ask locals to direct him to so-and-so person. This is a normal situation. But it is unacceptable to strike them when people go over to them like this. So this is the first question that is troubling people. After the strike, of course, the people of the village got into a very bad mental state.
Somebody اتصل واحد من like 5 seconds ago فممكن تعيد الفكرة آخر جملة.
After this incident, people lived in a very frightening night, not just in Kashmir, but also neighboring villages. Everyone rushed to the site of the bombing. to the point where many had debris falling on them because bombs were still coming down. People have the habit, when there's a bombing or an explosion somewhere, to rush to the people's rescue. So debris and bombs were still falling on people as they rushed to the scene. It was very scary. So the people witnessed all this, and all this death, for the first time. After this, the situation became very bad in Kashmir and the surrounding areas in Hadramaut. People started being very careful not to go on rooftops, which they usually did in the summer, not to go out in the evening or at night. People stayed at home. There were no more celebrations. Hadramaut used to be known for its celebrations, for its dancing in the evening. People stopped dancing and stayed home. It was only if you absolutely had to. For example, if you were sick, that you took your car out to go to the hospital, and then returned quickly home. The idea was that any person walking anywhere, or encountering an unknown car, could be a target. It could be that one of these cars stopped in front of your house by accident, and you were in danger of being killed. That was one phase that passed. After that came another phase, which is during the time I've been here in Canada. The flights and bombings continued, with many strikes since. Now I call home when I get the chance. I ask if there were more strikes, how things are over there, and they tell you people have become used to it. That scares me. For the people, that killing has become normal. I know Hadramaut and its people, and I can speak about that part of Yemen. This killing is truly frightening for them. People of Hadramaut are peaceful by nature. They're the ones who spread Islam to Indonesia, to Asia. They're honest and trusting in their dealings. They don't know violence. They don't know deceit. They don't know dishonesty in business. They're law-abiding people. Other Yemenis see them as cowards. But it isn't fear. It's respect for the law and honesty. But now, these people don't care anymore if they see a dead body or a mangled body. I spoke to a colleague of mine in Hadramaut. I told him, "Brother, I hear there was an airstrike." He said it didn't matter. They say 4, 5 people were blown up. It doesn't matter. Maybe the bombs will fall on us. It doesn't matter. We'll die. It doesn't matter to us. I don't know. If death doesn't matter anymore, then maybe all the people who used to be afraid of Al-Qaeda and dying with Al-Qaeda might now join Al-Qaeda more easily. Or maybe it's okay for another person to join Al-Qaeda and die, and they won't care. It's become all the same. Whether you're with Al-Qaeda or a normal, peaceful citizen, you're going to get killed all the same. It's all the same. You might be alive today and dead tomorrow. This is what I wanted to talk about.
ولحد هلا يعني ما يزال ضربات من الدرونز او اغلبيه الضربات من الطيارات. لحد هلا لسه في ضربات من الدرونز او لانه احنا نقرا في الجرائد انه في كامبين قصف.
Are there still drone strikes? We've been reading a lot in the papers about Saudi airstrikes now, but not very much about American drone strikes. Yes, in the area I'm speaking of, Hadramaut, there are no strikes at the moment from either Saudi planes or US drones. There's nothing. It is assumed that at the moment this is an Al-Qaeda area. This is the assumption. although this is another issue, a political issue. I don't think it's only Al-Qaeda, but rather that there is a political game being played. When they struck, they said it was because Al-Qaeda was in Hadramaut, but it's the army itself who withdrew and let them enter. How can this happen? What I know is that the army officers who are in Hadramaut at the moment are Houthis. I know them very well from before this all began. They're all Houthis. The assumption was that they were enemies of Al-Qaeda. How Al-Qaeda arrives, and in all simplicity, with only 4 or 5 cars, occupies army garrisons and the army retreats, is something I don't understand, unless the two sides are working together, and the people who get lost and confused are the civilians.